Hello, my name is Kai, and I am a bit of a rambler. I like to travel, learn, and tell stories. And today we're gonna ramble on. We're gonna ramble on right now. What happened next in China? Next in China was, well, I did mention Chinese people don't like Trump, and they're quite against him like everybody else in the world because they don't like being attacked. They still like money, and one thing that was brought up twice to me by two different people was, yeah, he's super unreliable, but at least you're making a lot of money, your country. And I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, because all the tariffs. So, and they brought this up the exact same way. It was almost the exact same conversation both times. It went like that. And I said, what are you talking about? And they said, well, because all of the tariffs. When I read the articles and I watch Trump's speeches, he's imposing those tariffs and he says the U.S. is going to make so much money because it costs more for people to sell goods to the U.S. And both times I had to be like, no, tariffs it doesn't cost more money to sell to the country inflicting tariffs. It means that the people of that country pay more for those goods. So the other countries are making just as much money. It's just that the U.S. Americans inside their country are paying way more for goods than usual. And both times they were like, what? And then they looked up what a tariff was. They're like, wait, why would anyone do that? That doesn't make any sense. That means that for every country in the world, Trump is making U.S. Americans pay more money for oil and whatever else, meat. Yep. And they were very surprised. And they're like, but he said that the U.S. would be making money from the tariffs. And I was like, this is why you shouldn't listen to anything he says, because he doesn't understand the words coming out of his mouth. To quote Chris Tucker, do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? Is that Rush Hour? I'm sure that holds up well. I saw that movie more than any other movie in the movie theater, I'm pretty sure. So tariffs. Tariffs did come up twice and the exact same conversation, and then they found out what a tariff was. And that was the only thing. They were like, well, at least he's making a bunch of money for the U.S. And then they found out that he was costing the U.S. way more money. Because there's no manufacturing base in the U.S. There's no choice but for U.S. Americans to buy imports or exports of other countries. So they're not going to start buying American. They can't. There's very few American manufactured products. They have to purchase these things that now cost 10, 30, 50, 100% more, 125% more, because Trump doesn't know what a tariff is. And I'm telling this to Chinese people who can buy the newest SUV with higher safety standards than any other vehicle on the planet for $8,000 US. Or a new bed for $10 US. Like the US, they know is really expensive, but they're bewildered when I tell them the price of a microwave in the US versus the $3 maybe they are in China. But it was interesting because I didn't talk to a bunch of people about Trump or politics, because at this point, there's no debate anymore. Everybody in every country is just like, wow, that's an embarrassing world leader in the U.S. That must be terrible. It is. But I thought it was interesting that the tariffs were brought up twice. He must have given so many broadcasts on tariffs that even in China, they believe in Trump's misunderstanding of what a tariff is. Oh, the programmer that I mentioned in the last episode. So there's a programmer living at this hostel, and the cops came and asked him questions. And this is like his third day in China or something, or a week, whatever. But he can speak zero Chinese. I actually taught him. I gave him his first Chinese lesson. He was only in China his third day, second, whatever, when he met me. And I taught a bunch of foreigners Chinese before, so I gave him his first Mandarin lesson. And but these cops came in and started interrogating him, and so other people had to translate for him, and he had to show his ID to show, here's the kicker, to show I'm pretty sure that he's not Uyghur. If you don't know, Uyghur is the ethnic minority in Xinjiang that China has sent about half of the entire population, over 1 million people, to concentration camps, but they're not Nazi concentration camps. There is a difference, but they are re-education camps is probably a better way to put it. They do have to do some physical labor, reportedly, and they do have to, actually, some of them are tortured, reportedly, by former prison guards. But China's obviously very close, so there's little confirmed stuff, except hundreds of thousands or millions of Uyghurs went to these re-education camps to reunify with China. Really, Xi Jinping doesn't want them to become a separate country. Uyghurs want to be separate, or at least get like a Hong Kong status, so they're part of one China, but they are a distinctly separate province. And Xi Jinping does not want that. He just wants more territory and a bigger country. So half the population strongly disagrees with Xi Jinping's viewpoint. So he built prisons for 1 million of them and threw them all in prison until they agreed to be part of China, basically, until they agreed to stop being activists or posting messages about a free Xinjiang on social media. And that's according to Chinese newspapers. This is not a Western perspective. That's what the government and their newspapers in China are reporting, that they are re-educating activist Uyghurs, hundreds of thousands of them, so that they become part of China. Oh, I brought this up because that, I think, is why the cops showed up, because this guy is ethnically Central American, actually, but he looks like a Uyghur. He's just the exact right mix, which you probably don't know what I'm talking about. A Uyghur looks like a Middle Eastern / Western European person. They don't look like the stereotypical Chinese person, and they do have a distinctive pattern of their face. Their nose bridges are larger, whereas the Chinese Han ethnicity, the majority ethnicity, the nose bridge is very flat against the face. They have rounder cheekbones, Uyghurs, and their hair is a different color. It can be brown naturally. Their eyes are rounder, like you would see in Western Europe or a lot of the Middle East. So they look noticeably different. Like if you had a room with Chinese people and Uyghur people, you would be able to pick them out of the crowd most of the time. You'd be able to separate that room most of the time because they look so distinctly not Chinese, in the same way that I and most Western Europeans are going to look not Chinese. And this dude, this programmer, looks Uyghur. He looks more Uyghur than many Uyghurs. He has the exact nose and eyes spacing, especially in China. You'll notice it more because there are many ethnic minorities. There's 52, something like that, different ethnic minorities in China. But most of them look similar to Han Chinese. The bridges of their noses not pronounced. Their eyes are not much rounder. Their jawline is the same. So they're not noticeably different. You go to Xinjiang, noticeably different, many of them. They look more Western European and Middle Eastern. And that was the only time cops went into that place, and he's the only person they asked about. They went straight to him. They ignored the other foreigners, and they ignored all of the Chinese people. They just asked him for proof of identification. So what probably happened is a Chinese person saw him, said, "Uh-oh, there's a Uyghur here," and called the police on him. That is what I would guess. Because every Chinese person that met him asked if he was from Xinjiang in Chinese when they met him. Like, that was the first thing they asked him. Uyghurs speak Arabic and English and Mandarin Chinese, usually as a minimum. So Chinese people who only speak Mandarin can speak to the Uyghurs, even though it's a very geographically separated province, isolated province. But they can speak Mandarin Chinese perfectly, so I saw it. I hung out with this programmer several days while I was at the hostel, and I don't know, 5 times at least, I can remember off the top of my head, a Chinese person walking up or talking with us for a second and then turning to him and being like, "So you're from Xinjiang?" And he would look at me like, "What did he say?" Because he didn't speak any Mandarin. I say, "Nope, he's from Mexico." They'd be like, "Wow, 墨西哥，真的吗？你看一下我." Like, yeah, at that point, after a few times, he's like, "Is he saying that I look?" Yeah, everybody thought that, so that's probably what happened. He was probably reported for being an ethnic minority in China, which is the state of China. It's kind of like all those YouTube videos you see of the US where a black guy is walking around his neighborhood and a Karen shows up and tries to call the cops on him for walking around in his neighborhood because most of the neighborhood's white. Or what they say is, "You just look different." I'm not going to say it out loud, but I felt I had to call the cops because you weren't familiar to me. Oh, really? The 1% of the population that is black was unfamiliar to you, the 99% white people in your neighborhood? Anyway, programmer, it was nice to meet you. Best wishes. He's planning on working there in China for a long time. I think he has like a 2-year contract with Tencent. Great. He's going to make a bunch of money in the first few months or whatever. But yeah, that's going to be tough with all Chinese people thinking that you're an ethnic minority that they're not particularly warmed up to because the government just spreads an enormous amount of propaganda about Uyghur citizens being particularly violent, because that sort of message helps them put them in the re-education camps. And the people in the hostel, when a Chinese person meets someone, it's normal and they're so practical. What I like about Chinese people is they are incredibly practical. So they're not one of the major religions. They're very superstitious, but being non-religious tends to make them a very practical people. They don't spend any time worshiping a single deity, although they'll pray to like the money god or the river god or whatever, or an ancestor. But they don't spend a lot of communal time believing in one deity as many cultures do. And this is 1.5 billion people in China. That's a lot of people. So instead, it seems like they're humans, so they still take lead. We have this need to look for a leader. So they believe in their government, and all of their news is coming from their government. And what the government tells them, often they believe because there's no alternative stories. Anyway, good luck, programmer, my friend. Oh, I met another foreigner while I was staying at this hostel, and he was real bummed the first day I showed up and real drunk, and he just looked chemically and personally depressed. But he was listening. He couldn't really put 2 sentences together, but he was listening to me while I was talking about traveling with a few other people around the pool table. And he was like, "That's cool," a couple times. And then a couple days later, he came up and said, "Hey, man, I just want to tell you, I found your stories really inspiring. And I feel like I made the right choice now." And he explained to me that he used to teach English in China, but he didn't save any of his money. He just kind of partied the whole time. And then he went back to the States and he didn't have any money, but he lived in China for several years. So he went back to the States thinking like, all right, well, I'll just get a job here and I'll like recoup my losses and I'll like recharge and all that. But as soon as he got back to the States, he remembered, oh my God, just getting an apartment is such an ordeal. I have to provide first and last month's rent, which you often have to do in China, except first and last month's rent is $200 instead of $3,000 in the US. And he can't find a job that fits his major. The only thing he can find is, making a sandwich for people that pays whatever, $9 US an hour. He has to get a car because he can't walk anywhere in the US. You have to drive to pretty much everywhere in the US. So there's insurance for that, and he has to register it, and he just became overwhelmed. And so he was talking with his friends, and he was telling his US American friends, I think I have to go back to China because this is if I work at this pace, even if I did get a job in my field and I was making $60,000 a year, I'm going to be saving so much less than if I was in China making $25,000 a year, which is true. If you're in China and you make $25,000 a year, easily you can save $15,000. I'll say easily you can save $10,000. Easy, easy, easy. Pretty easy, you can save $15,000. You can spend $10,000 a year in China and live very comfortably. In the US, if you're making $60,000, that's about $20,000 gone. So now you have $40,000 that you can save. You'll need a car. You'll need to pay insurance. You will need your homeowner's insurance. Any groceries you buy are going to be about 8 times the cost of what they are in China. So if your grocery bill right now is $1,000 per month if you have a family, I guess if you're, let's say, just a single person and you're spending $300 to $400 in the US on food, you can spend $50 in China getting all the same food and probably fresher produce and meat. Let's say you don't get a car. You have to ride the bus twice a day going to and from work, and that's $5 a day, $2.50 each ride. It's, I don't know, maybe 16 cents in China for the equivalent ride. I guess that's more like 5% of the cost, but it is. It's 1 yuan to take a bus across the city. Whereas in the US, it's like $2. I don't know what the average is now. Let me check. It looks like about $2 per ride, so 90+% more expensive than in China. So everything he's paying for in the States for a few months back there, or I think it was 6 months or something, everything costs literally 10 times as much as he's used to paying in China, and he's not even working at the job he wants to work at. I think maybe he was a journalist, which obviously right now would be an incredibly difficult job to get, first of all, but also to hold or maintain in this sort of political climate where objective news is attacked in the US, almost deprecated. So he talked to a few of his closest friends when he went back, and they told him, like, no, man, the only thing I can tell you for sure is don't go to China. And they had never been to China, and he lived there for years. But he didn't want to go through the struggle anymore, the grind that apparently ended with him at, 65, retiring with none of his health or youth left, with some money in the bank, probably, enough to survive until he died. Versus he remembered making money teaching English in China, and every month he could have saved a ton of money and basically just didn't, and then used a lot of his savings up when he went back to the States. And then I was talking to people about investing in index funds and real estate trusts, and specifically how much money just as an English teacher you can save in China. And so he was depressed the first week. It was his first week back in Beijing, apparently. And he was depressed because he was like, oh my God, did I do the right thing? All of his friends were telling him, no, come home. This is crazy. You won't save any money. It's dangerous out there. And okay, by the way, for what the government is doing to the Uyghurs, municipal life for non-Uyghurs, for all the other 1.5 billion Chinese people and any tourists, it's incredibly safe in Beijing and in China in general. They are generally a very relaxed, non-violent, non-aggressive people, and it's a very, very safe country. But all these people who had never been there were telling him he should come back, and he wouldn't save any money because there's no good jobs there. But he perked up after that first night that I was talking to everybody in the hostel around the pool table, and told me a couple days later that he was really happy. And then we talked for 30 minutes after that, and he just asked me about jobs and stuff. And he told me after that day, he actually got a teaching job and was going to move down to one of the southern provinces. I can't remember which one now. But he was going, was it Ningbo? I can't remember. He was going down to some city in more southern China because there was a job waiting for him. And even though now English is taken out of schools, there are still private training centers all around everywhere. Like, there's still a lot of private training centers and hundreds of free jobs. Because after they canceled like anybody can open up a training center in China. A ton of the teachers left. And so even though there are reduced numbers of postings, there's also not as many English teachers. There's like less than half of what there was 5 years ago when they canceled English in all government schools, so you don't have to study English anymore. So there are still tons of available jobs out there in China. Oh yeah, so that's why I'm making this podcast. I couldn't remember why I was saying that. That's why I'm making this podcast. I am happy to share this information, and really, it just takes looking at it from a different angle. If you are from the US or from not China, and you think you don't have any skills, but you speak English, guess what? You have a skill that you can use to retire in several years. Take a plane, go to a country that costs 90% less than the one you're living in, you'll be saving 90% more per month. That's how it worked for me. That's how it worked for a bunch of teachers that I worked with. That's it. If you're making $3,000 and you're saving $2,000 a month, you have $24,000 a year to invest, and that passive income comes right back to you. And regardless of how much you're making in another country, are you saving that equivalent amount? Are you saving $24,000 or are you saving $40,000 USD per year at that job? And is that your goal? That was my goal. I want to save the most money with the least amount of work. And so I decided to live in low-cost countries for a decade and then keep living just because they're more chill. But it really is nice thinking, boy, I could use an air fryer and then I can order one and get it on the same day for $5. Or, man, I really want an electric scooter. And the cost of it doesn't even enter my mind because it's going to last for a year probably. Even no matter how it's made, there are standards of manufacture in Beijing. And if it doesn't work, you can send it back for free and they will give you a new one. But this thing, for as long as it's guaranteed it's going to work for a year or 2 years or 3 years, going to cost you maybe $30 for a transportation thing that can get you across the city for years. It's just a completely different way of living. Even not very rich people in China all have personal vehicles. They all have like motor scooters or electric scooters. Tons of them have electric cars that, again, are, if you're getting the sedan and not like the newest SUV, they're only $4,000 US. New. I don't know how much the used ones are. Those used electric scooters are only $30 US. You can get a used, refurbished electric moped with a 100-kilometer range for $30 US. You just plug it into all the local charging ports. Man, I know I get sidetracked on this a lot, but it is remarkable living in a low-cost country, especially for me coming from the US. So that guy was very happy. He said hearing my stories helped to make the right choice. Then we talked a little more, and he seemed really excited about being back in China. And he said it was the first time he felt that since he got back because he was so confused with all the people telling him all the people back from the US who had never traveled abroad were telling him things that are culturally appropriate in the US, but are factually incorrect. As soon as you've traveled, you can see like, well, no, that's wrong. It's safe here for me. There are plenty of jobs for me. I can save more money here. I like this podcast. I like hearing from you guys when you write in, and I like it when people like that tell me that my practical view of the world helps them feel more comfortable where they are in their life. I like that. It felt good. Next item on the list is something gross. I was in a restaurant and a guy turned to his left and sneezed into the main aisle of the restaurant. It's a small restaurant. There's 2 rows of tables against the walls, and this guy sneezed into the middle toward me on the other side. And then a guy on my side turned into the middle and sneezed into it again the other way. So that's still gross. I want to say it's much less than I remember. There's not as much finger picking up the nose, and there's not as much sneezing and coughing. And if you go to China, you'll be like, oh my God, it's everywhere. And it is. But it's so much better than when I got there. When I arrived in China, it was just constant. You could not walk down an alley or road without someone hawking and spitting and digging their nose or ear and then wiping it like on their clothing, or like sneezing and then looking at their hand. That's how everyone did it. Now, things are changing, I think, because of social media. I think that more than anything else is letting Chinese people know, like, this is how people see you if you sneeze in public without covering your mouth, or if you dig your nose. It seems much less frequent than what I am used to, although those habits are certainly still happening. It's such a monoculture, such a huge monoculture. It's so crazy, and it was completely standardized by Mao. So they all think the same. So if you grew up in a family and they were like, well, you only have to wash your hair twice a week, the whole family, because they live in one house together, that's their culture. So they'll only wash their hair twice a week. Same goes for China. If something became normal, like not covering your mouth when you sneezed, the whole 1.5 billion people do that habit. They all have the same habit. It's pretty wild, and it's pretty crazy how much it has changed in the past 15 years. I mean, social media is... There's going to be tomes on how social media affected behavior globally. But that's one of them. I think Chinese people are becoming more courteous in public, although there's still some ways to go. Okay, I met up with my friend and he showed me the first Coca-Cola factory in China. The first ever one. It was in the southwest of Beijing, and the site is still there, although they took down half of the factory and now it's just used as a warehouse. But that was cool. I got to see the first ever Coca-Cola factory site in China, which is kind of a big thing. Coca-Cola is huge in that country. And this is where that was their first step into the country 50 years ago. Actually, it's still in Beijing. They just moved locations. Pijiu Kao Ya. Okay. Pijiu Kao Ya. Beer fried roast duck. So they marinate duck in beer, and then they fry it in oil, and then they air dry it on not a rotisserie, like a rotary wheel. What do you call those convection ovens things? So it's like a very low heat convection oven, and the duck is hanging on a rotary wheel. There'll be like 8 of them on a wheel just spinning around in a circle. And for some reason I still don't understand, that costs $4 to buy a duck. I guess closer to what I saw was like $5, but $4 to $5 US, you can get a whole duck with that much preparation and complexity of cooking method going into it. And it's so delicious. And I couldn't find a good one. I really think my neighborhood that I was staying in, that hostel, was not a great area for food in general in Beijing, because I had to look around a lot whenever I wanted a specific thing I liked. I had to try several of them before I found a good one. I never found good noodles. I don't know what they were serving in the middle of Beijing, but they were all like fat, crappy, like spaghetti. They almost tasted like spaghetti noodles, which is gross compared to like chow mein noodles or egg noodles. The big, fat, floppy spaghetti noodles are not, they don't have the same bite to them. It was really weird. I couldn't find any good rugan mian. But I think it was because of the neighborhood I was in, and they just bought the cheapest noodles because, I don't know, maybe like everyone's new to Beijing, so they don't know what good noodles are like. I don't know. I'm very confused. But it was difficult to find good food. And I found a couple Pijiu Kao Ya places, but one of them was like $8 for the duck, or $8.50 US, which is double what I'm used to paying. And it didn't look very good. It looked kind of corporate. It looked a little too fancy, so I didn't trust them anyway. And it was twice as much, so I was like, nah. And I just kept walking around. And then a few days before I left Beijing, I found it. I I found PGO Khao and it was this lady down an alley, little sign, PGO Khao, and I saw them and I saw the way the skin was dried and the brown of the skin from being marinated and fried and then air dried. And I was like, that's it. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And I got one even though I was already full. And it was my second dinner with some beer. And I think I watched more of that Video Game High School series. And it was very satisfying that I was able to find one even in this dearth of high cuisine that I was living in. That was a great PGO Khao. Man, so much good food in China. I was like, it would be worth it living here again just for the food. If I could just eat this food all the time. But that's a trap because I have to keep learning and exploring. Can't rest on my laurels. I already did that for 6 years. Ganbian Doujiao. I found a good Ganbian Doujiao, but I never found the perfect one. And it's why I mentioned what I mentioned before. They just cooked it wet. So you have to demoisturize. You have to dry the beans first. And you have to throw in the meat afterwards or they just get oily and soggy instead of crispy, crunchy, salty, tasty. What else? Oh, rogan man. I just mentioned that. So that's like hot, dry noodles. So it's like stir-fried. It's kind of what the U.S. chow mein is like a little bit. But it has different spices and it's a lot drier, not so oily. So that stuff is great, but I could not find that also. I think that was, again, I was in the middle of the city. If I go back to Beijing again, I will be living on the outskirts. It was that's where I found that amazing frog restaurant and the people were chill and everything was so much more relaxed out on the outskirts. So when I do go back to Beijing, I'll be living out there on the edge. And they still have a subway line, so you can get back into the city if you want to. Oh no, the next thing on the list is Baijiu. Okay, so Baijiu is white liquor. It's the rice wine made in China that is terrible and disgusting and tastes terrible and is gross and is 40% up to 60%, usually closer to 40. And it just tastes like rubbing alcohol. It's so gross. So I don't drink it generally, but the thing is I wasn't planning on drinking any, but I went back to this place that sells craft seltzers. It's like a mini bar. There's a bar inside that you can sit at. And they have like 8 different craft beers and then 6 different craft seltzers. And I was excited about the seltzers and excited just about the craft brewing scene in Beijing, which apparently has popped up in the last 5 years and they're really popular these days. I definitely don't remember seeing them when I arrived in China or even 5 years ago when I was there. But apparently they're around the city now. So I went in and I got a seltzer because I had already been there and they had a great other seltzer and a good beer. But this time when I went in and talked to the lady, same bartender as before, after, 5 minutes of me drinking a seltzer and very much enjoying it, I think it was a passion fruit seltzer, this very not sober guy stumbled in and I was like, oh man, and maybe I'll just go. But then he turned to the bartendress that I was familiar with and he was like, blah, blah. And I was like, oh no, because it sounded like he was her husband. And then he saw me and he got really excited. And she was like, this is my husband. And she's stone cold sober. And he's literally falling down and only being held up by other people. So I could have left. I could have said, thank you so much. But instead, I like to see where things go. So I just let this guy talk. And he was very excited. But after like 10 minutes, he wanted to drink some baijiu. And long story short, I ended up drinking baijiu with him. Much more than I thought I was going to drink. And I got schwiggity-schwasted, and I hated the taste every time, but I wasn't doing anything that week, and I was like, hey, I'm in China. And they were all very nice. He was with his friends. He was by far the drunkest person, and I could speak Mandarin, so it was fun talking to them. And it was a nice time, and they took out snacks like chicken feet, which are very popular bar snacks to eat with beer, just like nibbling the cartilage off the chicken feet. I know that doesn't sound appetizing, and it's not high cuisine, but it's fine. It's salted cured meat. It's salted pickled meat. So it's still pretty tasty to eat salt when you're drinking beer. Or Baijiu. Oh my gosh. And I got schwiggity-schwasted, and then I had a great time. I was like, thanks, guys. And we closed out the bar. I think I must have been there for like 4 hours just talking with everybody and being a dummy. But they were just excited to talk to a foreigner. It wasn't dangerous or anything like that. They just love it when a foreigner shows up, especially one who can speak Mandarin, so they can ask me all the same questions. You eat rice? But do you eat spicy food? So it was a fun little party. Bar closed. I'm feeling like I'm floating on air, even though I'm feeling kind of sick. And I was like, I got to get this Baijiu out of my system. And so I decided to jog. And I'm jogging. I was like, man, this feels great, Baijiu. And I was like, this is amazing. I should run faster. And I ran faster until I was like straight out sprinting down the sidewalk. And then I fell down and I scraped my knee and the bottom part of my forearm. Not real bad, but it was really funny. I just like stood up. I wasn't disabled or anything. I just fell down and then stood right back up. And I'm like alone on the street sprinting down these massive Beijing sidewalks. Just thinking just laughing at myself, thinking about how stupid I am. And of course I hurt myself because blood sacrifice, I'm leaving Beijing soon, so I have to hurt myself. And then Baijiu. I drank Baijiu. Every single time I can remember getting hurt or losing something or something bad happening in China, it was from drinking. I definitely drank too much every single time something bad happened. And I had beer, a bunch of beer with my friends since I arrived, but I had Baijiu, and that was the red line that I crossed. And so I had these cuts on my hand, on my arm and knee for the last few days in Beijing and for a week after. And I just was like, yeah, man, learn from this. Don't take that much Baijiu. Have a shot with someone and then say thank you and leave. Don't empty multiple bottles with somebody just for fun. You know it's poison. I went back there the next day and had some beer with Terry. And then the day after that, I had some beer with Sean there. Or seltzers. And more yak jerky. By the way, everything in China, the whole time I'm doing this, you can just imagine me eating yak jerky the entire time. I asked my friend to buy me 1 bag, and they sent me 6 bags instead. And I only have 13 days in China? So I had to eat 1 bag, which is half a kilogram, like a pound, every 2 days. It was a lot of jerky. So I'm just snacking all day, every day. What happened? Tuiro. Oh, Tuiro hot pot with Sean. So I went with Sean's family and an old friend from the first school back in Beijing. We went to hot pot, and by this point, they believed me that I was like picky and I wanted good restaurants. And Sean still picked it. So I was wary, but when I showed up and saw it, I was like, yep, that's going to be really good. There's people in it. The signs weren't too new. There was not too many like waiters, and it wasn't too clean. It was very clean, but they were clearly focusing on the food more than trying to draw people in to their location. And the food was good. And that's pretty much all I have to say. The hot pot was amazing. I did add more hot pot into it to make it more spicy, and it was insane. It was even too spicy for me. It was burning my mouth off, but the flavor is so good that me and Sean are just both crying and staring at each other and smiling and nodding. It's really good. Oh my God, it's so good. But our mouths are like on fire. But you get used to it. It's fine. It was great. That was a very good meal. And you know what? I found out about Tuiro, which is really funny. I wasn't really into Tuiro before, but they got some, and I didn't like the first bite I had. And then I ate a bunch of it after that, but not as much as Sean and everybody else. But the next day, I got Tuiro at the traditional Sichuan restaurant that I like right around the corner from my hostel. And then Tuiro is like one of my favorite things now. Tuiro is really interesting. Tui means like crispy, and ro is meat, so it's like crispy meat, but it's it's not because of the texture of the meat, it's because of how they cut the meat. So when they cut it off the bone, they cut off a small piece. You know what? I'm going to explain this how it was explained to me. And if I am wrong, tell me, because I still don't actually understand it. I'm just realizing. I thought it was bone, but that seems unlikely. How it was explained to me is that the meat is cut off the bone, but it includes a very small sliver of bone with each piece of meat. So when you bite through the meat, you get it's not hard like a bone. You're not chewing on it because it's boiled first or cooked at a super high temperature first. So you can bite through it. There's just a little more bite to it. It's like maybe as difficult to bite through as like a fresh slice of radish. There's just a little more resistance than in the meat. So you get the meat and all the great flavor, and then you also get this interesting crunchy texture. And I don't know if that's bone or cartilage now that I'm thinking about it, because I don't know if they can, I don't know. If it is bone, tell me. I just looked it up, but it's not on the internet, which seems crazy because it was in tons of restaurants in Beijing, and I know it always has been. Let me look again. I don't know how it's not there. Weird. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting the wrong thing. There's tons of Chinese cooking channels and social media and everything. I don't see anything about cui rou. Anyway, it's a delicious roe and delicious type of meat, cut of meat. And the next day, I got it when I went to eat with Terry at another restaurant. He came to the traditional Sichuan restaurant, and it was amazing. That was some of the best meat I've ever had. The meat itself was made perfectly and cooked perfectly, dry, lots of flavor, not too dry, and then the crunchiness of the cui was really fun. And then the next day I had it again with Sean because it was so good. So Sean, thanks for turning me on to cui rou. I can't believe I wasn't eating it the whole time I was in China. I was kind of picky when I showed up in China. That was my first extra-national country, and I was not used to so many foods, and there are so many foods to try in China, unlike anything I had eaten before. But now, baby, am I glad to be back in the game. Okay, there's a brief note, I guess, so I'll close it out with these. These stories aren't very long. I met this guy from England who seemed very nice at first when he saw me, and he was really excited I could speak Mandarin, and I helped him get some things from the shop. And then he just followed me around while I ate dinner, and then he kept following me around. We started drinking, and then I drank with him for like 10 hours straight because he was so interested in me. And then he turned really weird and was accusing me of being in the CIA and got very angry. And so I left because he also said a lot of gross things about Chinese women that I didn't like hearing, and homophobic things and all sorts of weird things, gross things. And so I was like, later, you suck. But I drank all night with him because I was like, whatever, I'm drinking. I get to practice Chinese. This guy thinks I'm in the CIA for some reason. He got way more drunk than I did. And it was just interesting to watch it happening. That's a lot. That's why I stay in these conversations and situations a lot of the time. I just feel like I'm watching a documentary half the time when I'm interacting with another person. Like, well, look, and then the human suddenly became aggressive. No cause to be seen. From whence did his ire rise? Anyway, that guy sucked, and then I left. But then the next day, I was going to meet Terry, and I was planning to go to bed 8 hours earlier, and I was basically just up the whole day. And I got to go to bed for 3 hours, I think. I think I made it back there at like 2 p.m. And then I was going to meet Terry at 6. So I decided to just take a rideshare bike because they have very nice bicycles for rideshare. And it only costs 2 RMB per hour. So like 30 cents per hour, capped at 10 cents per day. That's not right. Capped at $2 US per day, and you can use the bike the whole day. So to get to the restaurant to meet Terry, it was an hour and a half away, 90 minutes maybe. And great, I thought. I have so much beer. in my system and just crap in my system. And so I just casually rolled my way, and it was great. I listened to a podcast. I felt so much better. I felt sick as crap when I woke up, and I was like, okay, let's go meet Terry and have a nice dinner. But after I made the decision to ride, after I rode on the bicycle for 90 minutes and got some good exercise, and I felt way better, but I was so full. And then we sat down, and guess where we went? We went to that frog place that we discovered that was so good, and they brought out another giant tray of frog. And I was like, oh my God, dude, I don't even know if I can eat it. And then I ate one bite, and then I ate the entire tray, and then I picked through it and looked for more. I can't believe I ate the whole thing. I ate a bunch of snacks, and I had like 3 dinners while I was drinking beer for literally 10 hours or whatever. It was crazy. But that frog, that's how good it is. Just eat it. Give me another tray. God, talking about it now, I kind of regret not stopping back in Beijing another couple of weeks, but I gotta get to the U.S. for this wedding. And I'm curious about Jeju, Korea, and I'm curious about Japan again. Don't go to Japan, Hokkaido right now if you're a camper, because there's triple the amount of bear attacks as usual. 13 people died last year and 200 something attacks. The bears are coming into Hokkaido and attacking and killing people. So if you're planning on camping in northern Japan, be aware. Okay, that's good for now. When we get back, we'll wrap up China and head on over to Mongolia. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you're having a great day. My day's going pretty well. You can talk to me at bitofarambler@gmail.com or Bit of a Rambler on Blue Sky and Lemmy. Have a great day. I will talk to you soon.